It was the kind of winter that felt biblical. Snow hadn't stopped falling for 3 days straight, and the wind off the Oregon mountains howled like a wounded animal. Most folks in the quiet town of Pine Hollow stayed indoors, nursing soup and old memories. But Harold Jenkins, 68, refused to break his routine. Every evening, just after dinner, he'd bundle up, grab his flashlight, and walk the winding country road behind their property. "It keeps my bones from rusting," he used to joke to Martha, his wife of 42 years. That night, Harold almost turned back. The snow had drifted knee-high in some spots, and his flashlight kept flickering. But something, call it instinct or fate, urged him to go just a little farther. That's when he saw him. A figure slumped near the bend in the road, barely visible in the swirling snow. Just a dark coat, tangled hair, and what looked like blood on the knuckles. Harold hesitated. For a moment, his army training kicked in, assessed the threat, maintained distance, but the man didn't move. Harold stepped closer. "You all right, son?" he called. No answer. Harold knelt down, brushing snow off the young man's shoulders. His face was gaunt, lips blue from the cold, eyes shut but still breathing, probably in his early 20s. No wallet, no phone, just a tattered backpack clutched in frostbitten fingers. Harold sighed, then muttered to himself, "Well, Martha's gonna kill me." Martha Jenkins had the kind of heart that bruised easy but healed hard. She hadn't wanted children, life hadn't made room for them, but she had mothered every dog, bird, or lost cat that wandered onto their porch. So when Harold walked in that night, carrying a half-frozen stranger in his arms, she didn't scream or panic. She simply cleared the guest room and set water to boil. "He's just a boy," she said, brushing his damp hair from his forehead. Poor thing. The stranger didn't speak for the first 2 days. Just slept, ate a little, then slept again. When he finally stirred, Harold was sitting in the corner with a crossword and a mug of black coffee. "Where am I?" the young man rasped. "You're safe," Harold said gently. "Name's Harold. My wife, Martha, patched you up. You've been here 2 nights. Snow nearly took your life." The man blinked, eyes darting toward the window. "I didn't mean to cause trouble." "Name?" Harold asked. He hesitated. "Eli. Eli Moore." It was a lie, but Harold didn't know that. Not yet. Over the following week, Eli regained strength. He was quiet, polite, and helpful. He insisted on washing the dishes, even though he didn't know how to work their old water heater. He fixed the squeaky hinge on the back door and chopped firewood without being asked. Martha adored him. "You remind me of my nephew," she said once, watching him stack logs. "The one who died in '98. He had your shoulders." Eli gave a faint smile. "I'm sorry you lost him." They never pried. Eli told them he'd aged out of the foster system, that he'd been drifting for a while, looking for work, trying to stay out of trouble. He said it like a man who didn't want sympathy, just shelter. Harold respected that. By the end of the second week, Harold did something he hadn't done in a decade. He handed over a spare key. "Not 'cause I expect you to stay," he said, "but because I trust you not to steal my damn tools." Eli chuckled. "You got it, sir." They didn't call him a guest anymore. He was just Eli, and soon enough, he was part of the Jenkins house. He started calling them Martha and Harold, then ma'am and sir, and eventually, in quieter moments, mom and dad. Martha would tell her friends at the market, "We didn't get the baby stage or the teenage tantrums, but this feels enough like family for me." Eli started going to church with them. Got a part-time job at the hardware store down the road. Folks in town knew him as the quiet boy who lived with the Jenkinses. Some asked if he was their grandson. Martha always smiled. Close enough. But sometimes when the wind blew too hard against the windows, or when someone mentioned the word Texas, Eli would freeze. His eyes would go glassy. He'd excuse himself, walk to the shed, and sit for an hour in silence. Harold noticed. He'd been trained to notice things other men ignored. One night, while they were watching TV, Harold asked softly, "You ever been down south?" Eli didn't look up. Not really. The lie sat there, unchallenged, between them. Still, Harold kept his concerns to himself. Maybe the boy had demons. Who didn't? Vietnam had left Harold with more ghosts than he could count. If everyone with a past deserved a prison cell, there'd be no one left on the outside. And truth be told, Harold liked having another man around. Someone to talk to about car engines and football, and how the world had changed too damn fast. Eli listened, nodded, even laughed at his old man jokes. It felt good, like having a son. Spring came. Eli stayed. Summer passed. Eli still stayed. By the time the calendar flipped over to the second year, Harold had stopped thinking of him as a guest altogether. He was family. Their family. What they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that Eli Moore didn't exist. His real name was Miles Rourke. And 10 years ago, he had done something so terrible it still made the news in parts of Texas. But in Pine Hollow, he was just the boy they saved from the cold. For now, by the time Eli had been with them for a full year, Harold and Martha had woven him so tightly into their lives that they forgot what silence used to sound like. He wasn't just a boarder anymore. He was the one who carried groceries when Martha's back gave out. The one who reminded Harold to take his blood pressure meds when he forgot. He helped Harold fix the fence after a spring storm and learned how to bake Martha's famous sweet potato pie, though he always burnt the crust. He's got the heart, Martha would say with a smile. Just not the hands. The house that had once felt too big for just the two of them now buzzed with small routines. Sunday breakfast, Tuesday grocery runs, evening TV, and popcorn. Eli never once asked for anything in return. He didn't bring girls home, didn't stay out late, didn't drink. To the outside world, he was the model son, quiet, respectful, even shy. But Harold wasn't blind. He noticed the way Eli sometimes flinched at sudden loud sounds. How his hands would tremble after watching the evening news. How, every July, as the 4th of July fireworks echoed across the valley, Eli would lock himself in the shed and not come out until morning. War flashbacks. Harold once asked gently. Eli looked up from his cup of tea and smiled faintly. Something like that. When the town of Pine Hollow celebrated its bicentennial, the Jenkins family, because that's what people call them now, was honored at the community center. A plaque was given for your unwavering kindness and community spirit. Eli stood awkwardly between Harold and Martha as their picture was taken for the local paper. His eyes didn't smile, though his lips tried to. That night, back home, he asked Martha if he could hang the plaque in the living room. She beamed. "You're part of that spirit too," she told him. "You brought it out of us." Over the years, life moved forward gently. Martha developed arthritis, Harold began walking with a cane, and Eli stayed. He got a full-time job at a lumber yard 2 towns over. Got used pickup, saved every dime. On weekends, he took Harold fishing by the river, even though Harold's hands couldn't hold the rod steady anymore. They still argued over football, over barbecue sauce, over how to load the dishwasher. Harold swore there was a proper way. Eli claimed it was all superstition. But beneath the lightness, a question brewed silently in Harold's mind. Where did this boy come from? He had asked early on, once or twice. The answers were vague. No family. A few foster homes. Nothing worth remembering. Martha refused to press. If someone's trying to forget, maybe we ought to let them. But Harold had served in 2 wars. He had met runaways, deserters, thieves, saints, and sinners. And he knew when someone was hiding something. Eli was good. Too good. He never slipped up. Never mentioned old friends, or teachers, or memories beyond the day they found him. It wasn't just unusual. It was unnatural. Still, Harold didn't dig. Didn't want to. Maybe some things were better left buried. One Christmas Eve, around their 7th year together, the 3 of them sat around the fire, the scent of pine and cinnamon thick in the room. Snow fell gently outside. Martha played a worn vinyl of Nat King Cole, while Harold sipped whiskey. Eli surprised them both with gifts, handmade. He carved a small wooden bird for Martha, painted it the exact blue of the robin she always pointed out in spring. For Harold, he made a cane holder, sanded smooth, with the initials HJ carved into the side. Harold blinked, visibly moved. "That's some damn fine craftsmanship, son." Eli swallowed hard. "It's the least I can do." Later that night, Harold sat awake, staring at the cane holder, tracing the grooves of his initials. His throat tightened with something he couldn't name. By year 10, Harold's hair was snow white. Martha's hands curled with age. Eli, now in his early 30s, still looked lean, strong, but something in his eyes had softened. He was gentler with Martha, more careful around Harold, always watching over them like a guardian. The townsfolk often assumed he was a biological son who'd come back home. No one really questioned it anymore. But Pine Hollow was small, and the internet was not. One afternoon, while cleaning out the attic, Harold came across an old box of books. Most were his military memoirs, classic westerns. But wedged between 2 volumes of Tom Clancy was something unfamiliar, a thin notebook with a cracked leather cover. Inside, a single Polaroid had been tucked away. It showed a much younger Eli, at least 5 years before they met him, standing on a porch beside a teenage boy and an older man. All 3 smiled for the camera, but Eli's eyes were unmistakable. On the back, in faded blue ink, it read, "Miles, summer 2012. Harold's hands trembled slightly. Miles? The name meant nothing to him then, but it would soon. That night, Harold didn't sleep. He sat in his chair, the photo in one hand, his cane in the other. A cold knot had formed in his gut. Eli was out late, said he was visiting an old co-worker. Harold waited until the house was silent. Then he pulled out his laptop. He typed, "Miles Rourke, missing Texas, 2012. The results took less than a minute. Teen murder suspect vanishes before trial. Family friend stabbed in home invasion. 18-year-old accused. Still at large. Miles Rourke disappears without a trace." The photo in the article matched. Exactly, right down to the scar on his cheek. Harold sat frozen. The mug of tea beside him went cold. His heart pounded, not from fear but from something deeper. Betrayal, grief, protectiveness. Had they harbored a murderer for 10 years? But Harold wasn't ready to call the police. Not yet. He had to know why. He had to speak to the boy he'd called son for a decade. And when he did, nothing would ever be the same. The morning after Harold discovered the article, the kitchen smelled like eggs and black coffee, but he couldn't taste a thing. Martha chatted gently about the weather while Eli stood by the sink, drying dishes with that calm, methodical rhythm he'd developed over the years. His presence had always brought comfort. Today, it chilled Harold to the bone. "Sleep okay, Dad?" Eli asked, smiling. Harold forced a nod. "Didn't sleep much. Old bones acting up. Want me to run into town for your pain meds?" "No," Harold said too quickly. "No, I'm good." Their eyes met for a second too long. Eli's expression didn't change, but Harold saw something flicker. He'd seen that look before. In war. A split-second calculation. A buried reflex. Eli wasn't just being polite. He was watching. All day, Harold couldn't shake the weight in his chest. He kept going back to the photo in the notebook, to the grainy online news clippings. He even printed one out and tucked it into his sock drawer like it was a dirty secret. The articles described it in horrifying detail. 18-year-old Miles Rourke, accused of stabbing 19-year-old Travis Miles during an alleged robbery gone wrong. Victim found with 5 wounds. Suspect fled before trial. Believed to have changed identity. Considered dangerous. Dangerous. That word didn't match the boy who'd held Martha's hand during her knee surgery. The boy who sang along softly to Johnny Cash on the radio. The boy who baked Harold a chocolate cake, lopsided but heartfelt, on his birthday. But the boy in that article? That was Eli, or rather Miles. The face, the scar, the same. Harold paced the living room, back and forth, cane thudding softly against the old wooden floors. The house, usually so quiet and safe, now felt unfamiliar, like a stranger had moved in and peeled off his mask after 10 years. He stared out the window. Eli was out in the garden, trimming the hedges, humming to himself. How do you ask your son if he's a murderer? That evening, Martha went to Bible study. Harold said he was too tired to join. The moment the car pulled away, he walked into Eli's room, something he hadn't done in years. It was tidy, too tidy. A worn-out Bible on the nightstand. A stack of Reader's Digest magazines. Clothes folded with military precision. In the closet, a single duffel bag tucked in the corner. Harold unzipped it with trembling hands. Inside, a utility knife, $200 in small bills, an old, folded map of Texas, and a second ID. The name, Miles Parker. Different last name, but same face. Harold felt his stomach drop. There was no more doubt. The boy they'd taken in had built himself an escape hatch. A second identity. A fallback plan. That night, he didn't sleep. Again. The next morning, Harold waited until Martha went to visit her sister. Eli was fixing the shed roof when Harold walked out, leaning heavily on his cane. He stood at the base of the ladder and called up calmly. "We need to talk." Eli looked down, squinting against the sun. "Sure thing, let me come down." When he reached the ground, Harold held out the photo and the printed article. Eli didn't take them. "I know who you are," Harold said quietly. "Miles Rourke." A long silence. "You were 18. People do stupid things. Maybe you were scared. Maybe you were cornered. But I need to know the truth. I deserve that much." Eli's eyes welled up, not with tears, but something darker. Fear, shame, and something else Harold hadn't seen in a long, long time. Desperation. "I didn't mean to kill him," Eli whispered. Harold didn't flinch. "So it's true." Eli nodded barely. "I was broke. Hungry. He owed me money. We fought. I had a knife. I didn't mean to, it just happened." "Then why run?" Eli looked up. "Because no one was going to believe me. And I didn't have anyone until I met you and Martha." Harold's jaw tightened. His heart ached. "You had someone. You have someone. We gave you a life. A home." Eli looked down at the ground. "And I never forgot that. Not for a day." Harold's voice cracked. "You should have told us." "I was going to." Eli stepped forward. "I swear I was. But every time I looked at her, at you, I got scared. You'd turn me in. You'd hate me." "I don't hate you, son," Harold said. "But you have to do the right thing." There was a long silence. Then Harold said the words that sealed his fate. "We'll go to the police together. We'll get a lawyer. I'll be with you through it all. But it has to end. You can't keep living like this." Eli's hands were shaking. "I'm not ready," he said. "You don't have to be ready. You just have to be brave." Eli looked at him. Something shifted in his eyes. Then it was gone. That night, Harold didn't come inside for dinner. Martha found his cane near the shed the next morning. She called for him. No answer. When she looked around back, she saw Eli in the garden, shoveling silently, sweat dripping down his back. He said Harold had fallen, that he hit his head, that it was too late by the time he got to him. The sheriff ruled it accidental. Martha wept for weeks. Eli stayed by her side, held her hand, cooked her meals, buried the truth, and buried Harold in more ways than one. The wind picked up that evening, whistling through the trees like a warning no one heard. Eli sat alone in the shed long after the confrontation with Harold. His heart thundered in his chest. His palms were raw from clutching the workbench too hard. Everything Harold had said echoed in his ears, word for word. "You don't have to be ready. You just have to be brave." But Eli wasn't brave. He had never been brave. He had spent 10 years building a lie, brick by brick. Now, it was crumbling, and the man who gave him everything, shelter, trust, love, was the one holding the match. He could turn himself in. He should. But the fear was louder than reason. Prison. Headlines. Martha crying. Watching her lose 2 men in one day. No, he would wait. Let Harold cool off. Maybe he wouldn't tell anyone. Maybe they could pretend it never happened. But deep down, Eli knew Harold Jenkins didn't bluff. It was just past dusk when Harold came back outside. The shed door creaked open. "I'm not calling the police tonight," he said. "But tomorrow, we make things right." Eli didn't respond. Harold turned to leave. Get some sleep. That's when it happened. A surge of panic. A scream of self-preservation. A moment Eli couldn't explain even afterward. He reached for the nearest thing, a rusted shovel leaning against the wall. He didn't think. He just moved. One swing. A sickening thud. Harold dropped instantly, crumpling like a rag doll, his cane falling to the ground with a sharp crack. Eli stood frozen, the shovel still in his hands, his breath caught in his throat. What'd I just do? The world spun around him. It took him a full minute to kneel beside the body. Harold wasn't breathing. Blood pooled slowly beneath his white hair, staining the dirt floor. "Dad," Eli whispered. His voice broke. No, no, no. He hadn't meant to kill him. He just wanted to stop him, just to pause everything, to buy time. But it was too late. Harold Jenkins, The man who'd saved him from the streets, who'd taught him to fish and change oil and trust again, was dead. At his hands. For a long time, Eli did nothing. He sat beside the body in the shed, numb, rocking slightly like a child lost in a nightmare. Then the survival instinct kicked in. If anyone found this, he stood up slowly, wiped his face, and scanned the tools around him. He needed a story. Something simple, believable. He dragged Harold's body out of the shed and into the garden behind the house. The ground was soft from recent rain. He dug a wide patch, pulled over the wheelbarrow, and placed Harold carefully inside. He winced at every movement, whispering apologies under his breath. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. He laid him near the edge of the garden path, where Harold often worked, and arranged him as if he had fallen and struck his head on the stone border. Then he hid the bloody shovel behind the tool chest in the shed, changed shirts, and scrubbed his hands with bleach. By the time Martha returned from her sister's house, Eli was inside, sitting silently on the couch, pale and wide-eyed. Where's Harold? She asked. Eli stood slowly, voice low. I think he's in the garden. He fell. The funeral was held 4 days later. The official cause, accidental head trauma from a fall while gardening. The sheriff, a longtime family friend, offered condolences with misty eyes. Damn shame, he said, patting Martha's shoulder. He was a good man. Martha sobbed quietly through the service. Eli stood beside her, one arm around her frail shoulders, his face unreadable. No one questioned the story. Why would they? Eli had been part of the family for 10 years. After the burial, the house felt different. Colder. Emptier. Harold's chair remained untouched in the living room, his boots still by the door. At night, Martha would speak to the empty space across the dinner table, whispering things like, "Did you see the paper today?" or "I miss your humming." Eli cooked every meal, cleaned every room, took care of Martha like a dutiful son. But inside, something had cracked, and it couldn't be glued back together. The guilt came in waves. He couldn't sleep. When he closed his eyes, he saw Harold's stunned expression. The blood, the silence. He stopped going to work, lied about stomach issues, then about depression. Martha didn't press. She assumed he was grieving. But every creak in the hallway, every distant police siren, every unrecognized number calling the landline made Eli jump. He started dreaming of trial rooms, of handcuffs, of Harold rising from the grave, asking one quiet question. Why? He considered running. Again, he opened his duffel bag, checked the second ID, counted the cash, looked at the map of Texas. But this time, he didn't leave, because deep down, Eli knew there was no outrunning this. No second chance at redemption. No more starting over. He had killed the only man who had ever loved him without condition. And that was a prison far worse than any cell. Martha never suspected. Not once. She told everyone Eli had been her rock, her strength, that Harold would have been proud. And Eli kept pretending. He tended the garden where Harold died, watered the tomatoes, repainted the shed, cleaned the bloodstained stone without flinching. From the outside, it was the image of healing. But inside the house, inside Eli, it was something else entirely. Something rotten, something waiting to be uncovered. And fate was already on its way. It had been nearly a year since Harold's death, and Pine Hollow had long since moved on. The garden bloomed again in spring. Martha's arthritis had gotten worse, but Eli, faithful, quiet Eli, was always there. Every morning, he made tea with too much honey. Every evening, he folded her blanket just right. If anyone asked, Martha would say she didn't know how she'd survive without him. And she meant it. Until one Tuesday afternoon changed everything. It was a cloudy day, the kind Harold used to call TV weather. Martha was curled in his old recliner, flipping through channels while Eli mowed the lawn out back. The local news had ended. A program called America's Most Wanted Cold Files began playing. She usually skipped it. Too grim. But the host's voice caught her attention. Coming up next, a chilling case from 2012. Miles Rourke, 18, accused of stabbing his best friend during a botched robbery in Houston. Still at large. Martha leaned forward, her tea sloshed in the cup. On screen appeared a photograph. A grainy but unmistakable face. Shorter hair, no beard, younger eyes. But she knew that face. She had kissed that forehead goodnight, watched it smile over mashed potatoes, stroked it when he was sick. It was Eli. Her hand trembled as she reached for the remote. She rewound, froze the image, stared. The narrator continued. Last seen in Amarillo, Texas, using a false identity. Believed to have fled north. Authorities suspect he may have assumed multiple aliases. Martha's blood ran cold. She looked down at the folded blanket on her lap, the one Eli had tucked around her that morning. Neat, loving, familiar. Her stomach churned. It can't be. She didn't move for a long time. The show continued, showing maps, police sketches, aged-up renderings. All of them looked like him. She turned off the TV, sat in silence. Her mind flashed back through 10 years. Eli refusing to take photos at the church picnic. Eli flinching when someone asked about his past. The bag Harold found and never spoke of again. The change in Harold's mood the week before he died. She had dismissed it all, called it grief, called it aging. But what if? That night, she waited until Eli was in the shower. Then she crept into his room. The duffel bag was still there, tucked in a closet corner like always. She unzipped it, fingers shaking. The map of Texas was still there. So was the knife. The old ID with a different name. And at the bottom, a photo she had never seen before. 3 people. A younger Eli, another boy, and a man. Written on the back in faded ink. Miles and Travis, summer 2012. Martha gasped. The name. The victim. Travis. This wasn't some mistake. Her son was Miles Rourke, a fugitive, a killer. And suddenly, so many things made sense. The night Harold fell. Why there was no autopsy. The way Eli never spoke of it. How he had cried so hard at the funeral, but never once said Harold's name out loud. Martha dropped the bag and ran to the bathroom. She vomited into the sink, clutching the porcelain. She couldn't breathe. She had welcomed a murderer into her home. She had loved him, and he had taken her husband from her. The next morning, Martha called the only number she had never used in her life. The FBI field office in Portland. I think I know where Miles Rourke is, she said, voice trembling. He's living in my house. With me. The agent on the other end didn't hesitate. Within hours, an unmarked black car was on its way. Eli didn't suspect a thing. He made breakfast like usual. Toasted English muffins. Scrambled eggs. Asked if she wanted to sit outside. Martha smiled, nodded. Played the role she had always played. But her hands were steady now. Her heart was cold. She stared at him across the table, memorizing the face that had fooled her for a decade. The eyes that had once made her feel safe. And she waited. Just after 11 a.m., the doorbell rang. Eli got up. I'll get it. He opened the door and was met by 2 plainclothes agents. Eli Moore, the taller one asked. Eli blinked. Yeah. We have reason to believe your legal name is Miles Rourke. You're under arrest for the 2012 murder of Travis Miles in Texas. Eli froze. The blood drained from his face. Then he turned to look at Martha and saw her standing there in the hallway, pale but firm. Tears welled in his eyes. You call them. She said nothing. His lips quivered. Mom. She closed her eyes. Don't call me that. They cuffed him and read him his rights. He didn't resist. Didn't beg. He just looked back one last time at the home he had made. The family he had stolen. The woman he had called Mom. And then he was gone. That night, Martha didn't sleep. She walked from room to room, touching objects like they were relics. Harold's old flannel shirt. The photo of the 3 of them at the church picnic. The cane propped in the corner. And in the middle of it all, the silence Harold had once loved now felt like a curse. The house was hers again, but it never felt so empty. The trial of Miles Rourke, formerly known as Eli Moore, drew more attention than Pine Hollow had seen in years. Reporters came in from Portland, even Seattle. True crime blogs lit up with headlines like, Fugitive Killer lived 10 years as model citizen in small Oregon town. He called them Mom and Dad. Then he killed one of them. Martha didn't attend the first week of the trial. She told the FBI she was too tired. The truth was simpler. She couldn't bear to see the boy she had once called son sit behind a bulletproof pane in handcuffs and an orange jumpsuit. But on the final day, she went. Dressed in black, face drawn thin, she sat in the back row of the courtroom, silent, unmoving. The courtroom was full. Locals, journalists, strangers drawn by morbid curiosity. When Miles was brought in, a few people gasped. But he didn't look at the crowd. He looked only at the floor. When asked to make a statement before sentencing, he stood up, hands trembling. His voice cracked at the first word. "I don't deserve forgiveness," he began. "Not from the court, not from the town, and especially not from Martha Jenkins." He paused, looked up just once and found her eyes. She didn't look away. "I lied. I hid. I killed a boy in Texas, and I killed the only father I ever had. I didn't plan to. I panicked, but it doesn't matter. I took a life. I destroyed a family. I wore your kindness like a mask, and I betrayed it." He took a breath. "For 10 years, you gave me more love than I ever had in my life. You saved me, and I repaid you with a lie and a grave." Martha's face remained expressionless. The judge read the sentence. Life in prison without the possibility of parole. Outside the courthouse, a reporter tried to get a word from Martha. "Do you feel justice was served?" She looked straight into the camera and said, calmly, "Justice was never mine to serve. But Harold is gone, and the truth is no longer buried." Then she walked away. The house on Juniper Lane was quiet again. Too quiet. For a while, the neighbors brought her pies, casseroles, homegrown tomatoes. But as weeks passed, the world moved on, as it always does, and the visits slowed. She filled her days with small rituals. Watering Harold's roses, dusting his chair but never sitting in it, folding and refolding linens no one would use. The photo of the three of them, Harold, Martha, and Eli, used to sit above the fireplace. She took it down, not out of hatred, but because the story inside it no longer felt true. In its place, she hung an old picture, her and Harold in their 20s, smiling on a dock in Maine. Before the lies, before the loss. Months later, she received a letter. It was postmarked from the state penitentiary. She almost didn't open it, but her hands moved on their own. Inside, "Dear Martha, I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but I needed you to know. I think about Harold every day. I see him in my dreams, sometimes forgiving me, sometimes not. I don't expect you to ever forgive me. I just wanted to say, you saved me. For a while, I was better. Because of you. I'm sorry I didn't stay that way. I will never stop being sorry. Miles." She folded the letter, placed it in Harold's Bible, and never read it again. Spring came. The cherry tree out front bloomed for the first time since Harold died. Martha stood on the porch and watched the petals fall like snow. She wasn't angry anymore, just tired, the kind of tired that lives deep in your bones. Sometimes she would sit in Harold's chair and close her eyes, pretend she could still hear his voice. Other times, she'd speak out loud to the silence. "You were right," she'd whisper. "He needed saving. We just didn't know from what." The final scene. Martha stands at Harold's grave with a single yellow rose in her hand. It's quiet except for the wind. She kneels, lays the rose down, and touches the stone. Her fingers tremble, but her face is calm. The camera slowly pans out. We see her walking alone down the cemetery path, sunlight breaking through the clouds above. She's not weeping. She's not smiling. Just walking. Because that's what survivors do.